Since 2020, Spain has been one of Europe's best performing economies. Despite COVID, it's grown by 8%, outperforming the likes of UK, France, to say nothing of Germany. In 2024, Spanish economic growth was 3.1%, accounting for nearly 50% of Europe's economic growth. It wasn't always like this. The euro debt crisis hit the Spanish economy really hard. House prices crashed, bond yields soared, and Spain was pushed into punishing austerity. It led to a decade of negative economic growth and an unemployment rate of over 25%. Combined with one of the lowest birth rates in Europe, currently just 1.16, the future for Spain looked bleak. In the post-crash era, Spain was left with unsold houses, roads to nowhere, and derelict white elephant airports like Castellón and Ciudad. In the boom years, local politicians had boasted about the local vanity project, but a derelict airport with a half-finished statue to a disgraced local politician was more than symbolic. With youth unemployment hovering over 50% and an economy in special measures, there was a mood of despondency and net emigration as people left Spain for more opportunities elsewhere. Yet in recent years, the economy of Spain has been revitalised, helped in large part by a huge movement of people. Tourism, long a staple of the Spanish economy, has received more than just a post-COVID bounce, with one study suggesting it will become Europe's most popular destination by 2040. However, whilst tourism has boosted revenues, economic growth and the balance of payments, it's also come with a darker side. High migration and exploding tourist numbers, especially through Airbnb, has meant that many locals have become priced out of housing in tourist hotspots. Protests have rocked major tourist cities like Barcelona with angry demonstrations. Like other parts of the world, it seems that economic growth has come at a big cost. Also, if we compare economic growth in Spain and the United Kingdom, two things stick out. Firstly, using GDP per capita, overall there is a remarkably similar growth since 2000. The second thing that sticks out is that the financial crisis hit the Spanish economy much more severely than the UK, and this largely reflected two factors. Firstly, the UK was of course not in the euro, Spain was. In response to the crisis, which actually really hit the UK's large financial sector very deeply, the pound fell 30%, which helped to boost domestic demand relative to if it had an overvalued exchange rate. Secondly, with its own currency, the UK never had the spike in bond yields like occurred in Spain around 2012. This meant that although the UK did voluntarily pursue a limited form of austerity, it was never as deep as Spain. In 2012, Spain increased VAT from 18 to 21%. They froze public wages and cut public spending by 65 billion euros. And also, when you look at this graph, in this context, Spain's recovery looks less spectacular. In large part, Spain's very strong economic growth since 2014 and also since COVID reflects catching up a bigger loss. You know, if you lose a lot of GDP and then you have growth of 8%, it doesn't look quite as spectacular when you compare the start and the finish. Also, another factor worth bearing in mind, whilst UK house prices fell 20%, Spanish house prices fell 35%. That was a bigger weight on the economy. Also, like the UK, Spain has had a big boom in net migration. In 2 years, 2022 to 23, there was net migration of 1.38 million people, 3% of the total population. Since 2021, over 1 million migrant workers, often from Latin America, have gained jobs, reflecting 75% of the growth in the Spanish labour market. But unlike, say, the United Kingdom, where high levels of migration have often corresponded to stagnant real wages, Spain has managed to combine both high migration with a rise in real wages. And this rise in real wages has been helped by a boost in the minimum wage, meaning that the lowest paid workers have seen the biggest percentage rise in wages. It means that, adjusted for purchasing power parity, Spanish wages are now only slightly lower than the European average. When Spain joined the European Union back in 1987, living standards were around 72% of the European average. But after 4 decades in the European Union, this has increased to 92% of the EU average. Despite the very painful years of the euro debt crisis, most Spanish can see strong benefits of the European Union, with support above average levels in Europe. Even today, Spain continues to benefit from EU funds. It was the second largest recipient of the EU's post-COVID Infrastructure and Recovery Fund, gaining €150 billion of investment in housing, energy and infrastructure. Like Italy, it has definitely helped Spain's economic recovery. As well as EU funds, it has also successfully attracted foreign investment, especially in renewable energy, AI data centres and electric car manufacturing. And although Spain has not particularly prioritised manufacturing, its huge boom in solar power and access to natural gas from North Africa has given Spain one of the lowest electric costs in Europe. The industrial cost of electricity in Spain is half the cost of the United Kingdom, and this has helped Spain remain competitive in manufacturing. Spain currently has 58% of energy from renewables, one of the highest in Europe, and its capacity is set to continue rising. However, the recent blackout in April 2025 was a major setback to this goal, with the power failure blamed on low inertia of solar power, a lack of a suitable backup, and insufficient energy grid systems. Reaching 80% renewable target may be more challenging than previously thought. Now, another strong aspect of Spain's strong economic growth has been successful investment in high-speed rail and new metro lines. Spain has nearly 4,000 kilometres of high-speed rail and built at a relatively low cost, and this is very important for a country with large geographic distances between major population centres. By comparison, the UK has only 113k of high-speed rail and will spend the best part of 2 decades to tortuously try and build the next 200 kilometres from London to Birmingham. A key factor behind Spain's success is the ability to build at relatively low cost. Its average build cost is just 17.7 million per kilometre, compared to a European average of 45 million per kilometre and a UK average of 232. Partly this reflects lower population density and easier terrain, but it is definitely more than that. There's a relentless focus on simple, repetitive design to minimise costs, learning from experience, and a relatively simple planning system. Spain has also been successful in extending metro systems in major cities, such as Madrid, Barcelona, Sevilla and Malaga. Again, it has achieved this at much lower cost than other countries. And these improved train links have been vital for commuters who work in major cities but feel increasingly priced out by high housing costs. And this is the darker side of Spain's recent economic boom. The Bank of Spain suggests that since 2020, there's been an increase in national rent of 30% and even more in tourist hotspots and major cities. And this increase in housing costs has been more than enough to wipe out those gains in real wages. Damaging housing costs is a familiar refrain from many countries, and it seems that Spain is no exception. Taking the gloss out of those apparently good economic growth, it means that all the impressive GDP statistics, a large majority of the population don't feel the benefit. Analysts suggest that in major cities, many tenants are paying over 50% of earnings in rent. In Madrid, to rent an average flat costs around €1,650 a month, which on an average salary of €2,340 is an eye-watering 71% of income. One reason for the low supply of housing is that in the financial boom years of 2000, Spain had a bubble in house building, and it meant that when markets crashed, Spain was left with unsold housing and prices collapsed, meaning many construction firms went under, and so the construction sector is much smaller than pre-crisis. And on top of that, given the large rise in population from high migration levels, the supply of housing has failed to keep up with demand. Now, the government have tried to impose price caps on renting, but the effect is only to reduce the attractiveness of renting and tends to create a two-tier rented sector with market prices far exceeding official rent caps. Now, it's not all doom and gloom away from housing. It is worth bearing in mind that Spain's economic growth has been more broad-based than just tourism. It has excelled in service sector exports with a growth in banking and financial services. In 2024, non-tourism service exports reached €100 billion, more than even tourism. And many of those former ghost towns in the aftermath of a financial crisis and even abandoned airports have found themselves actually proving more useful than initially feared. Castellón Airport, once a disused white elephant, is now accepting 300,000 passengers a year with 14 regular European routes. Even towns almost abandoned in the crisis years on the outskirts of Madrid have been revitalised by those superfast rail connections and of course a growth in workers trying to escape excessive housing costs in major cities. Yet for all the good news, average households are not particularly convinced because housing costs are eating into their real wages. And also, despite years of austerity, government debt is still over 100% of GDP, and the coalition government struggles to pass even minor tax rises or spending cuts. Another problem looming on the horizon is Spain's small share of spending on defence. With Trump pushing NATO countries to spend 5% of GDP, Spain is nowhere close, with just 1.28% of GDP on defence spending in 2024. To get anywhere close would require a huge opportunity cost, which will not be easy with an ageing population. Now, so far, mass migration has not proved politically toxic as perhaps other countries, helped perhaps by increased economic growth and some obvious benefits. But if housing costs continue to soar, it's only a matter of time before attitudes could change quite quickly. Spain has done many things very well, but like many countries around the world, it has failed to keep a lid on housing costs, which is such a great shame. And also, with one of the lowest birth rates in the world, how long can Spain rely on mass immigration to deal with a looming demographic crisis and ageing population? Why are birth rates so low? It's a very significant question affecting a country like Spain, and this video goes into more detail. Thanks for watching. Do consider subscribing and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And I do apologise, I might have slightly mispronounced some of those Spanish cities. What can I say? I did try to learn Spanish, but it only lasted a few weeks, and I'm afraid I gave up. Anyway, I'll try harder next time, but thanks for watching. Cheers, bye.